Hello, welcome to the Leveling Up podcast. I'm here today with Amber Lin. Amber helps head up the USBF's junior training program, and she is a world champion from the mixed teams a couple of years ago. So, Amber, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and really have been inspired and connected a lot with Adam's kind of posts so far about the Leveling Up series. So offered to kind of talk a little bit about my own experience, both with my personal journey and then also I've done a lot of training with juniors, kind of more in the intermediate to advanced kind of realm. So that's, I think, helped me think about the whole idea of structured training to improve your bridge a lot in the past couple of years.
Yeah, I want to start with the junior program. Did you come up through the junior program, Amber?
I probably learned the basics of bridge around 12 or 13 from my dad, who's totally obsessed with bridge. He's not the most serious player, I think, but he plays a lot. He really enjoys it. He likes reading bridge books. So I had kind of that access when I was young. But then I think I really started to learn about more advanced bridge when I joined the junior training program in around 2016, like when I was around late teens. I still remember like going to my first world championship in 2016 on the women's team, and Kent was our MPC. He's really one of the best MPCs, and I remember him teaching me what non-serious 3-no trump was. So to me, that was like a stepping stone of getting to kind of that next level of bridge at the time. So maybe more of like intermediate, beginner, intermediate to intermediate advanced level.
As a trainer, let's talk about that role that you have right now. You certainly see these juniors at the different levels, right? They're just starting and then they get up to the expert level. What would you say differentiates intermediate, advanced, expert? If you had to look at someone and classify them.
So to me, I think there's a couple different stages, and I kind of do think about them a little bit differently for card play and bidding. So I think for card play, I think that there's a big step up between like when you first start and you're playing and you're more playing based on themes that you've learned, like the theme of like drawing trump or like playing dummy's weak suit on defense, going for like a cross ruff or something. But then the next step after that is to actually count out every hand. And so I think that's a big step up for a lot of our juniors, like when they can actually start like visualizing and counting out the opponent's hands, including shape, high card points, using some basic inferences. And then I think you also have talked a lot about like how do you get from like an expert to a world-class level in card play. Once you get to the point of you're counting every hand pretty comfortably, you've seen a lot of different themes, like you know how to like do some false cards or like do some more complicated technical card plays, and know how to do some deceptive plays based on your understanding of what's going on in the hand to like create a different illusion for your opponents. So I think most experts are pretty much able to like pretty comfortably count out every hand with all the major inferences and apply like a decent number of these more advanced techniques to get to then that world-class level. I feel like the world-class players like instantly can absorb like all the basics with like no mental energy spent there. And then they can actually use their mental energy on much more complicated versions of like I think deceptive plays especially, as well as like having more complex carding agreements, knowing when you can logically change from like a count to a suit preference in one suit and actually be on the same page. And then bidding can be seen a little differently. I think a big thing we're trying to get the juniors to is just like feeling comfortable, like knowing what the quote unquote like expert standard phrase of a certain bid is, and like not get too fancy with it. But I think like once you can get to that point and you've built up your like encyclopedia of concepts to that point, then the world-class level, and even expert and to world-class to a bigger extent, then you can start actually knowing how to use a logical inference based on the auction or feeling good about reading your opponent's hesitations and whatnot, and actually knowing when to do a higher risk, higher reward deviation from what the expert standard is. I think that's what really differentiates them.
So what do you think happens to somebody who is an expert and then gets to that next level? Like, is there specific work that they need to do? When do you know you've hit that level, and what's different?
I mean, I feel like I have not hit that level, so I don't actually know for sure. But I think in my version of it, of maybe more going from like a more intermediate advanced player to a more advanced expert player, for me personally, I think what I've seen in my own journey over the past few years, really. So I think like a lot of this is still very fresh to me because I feel like basically maybe 5 years ago, I was not counting every hand. Like, I was not able to do that yet. And like when people gave me like a double dummy problem, I would need to stare at it on paper and that kind of thing. So then I feel like I've seen myself kind of progress naturally to being able to visualize things in my head more, and just like being able to have somebody like give me a hand, like a full 4 hands, and solve it. So I think there's a few different combinations of, I think, things that I've seen just from my own experience is like, I think at the table, a big one is just reduced number of like quote unquote silly mistakes. I think that's a big one. And I'm still kind of focused on that at the table nowadays, just making sure I'm properly, like everything adds up to 13. All the high card points add up. I'm not like accidentally miscounting something or forgetting someone was a passed hand, for example. I think now getting to the point where like I used to feel like I would make several mistakes like that in every game. And then now I can get to the point where like I might have one over a couple days in a tournament, something like that. That's really my goal right now. I do feel like it becomes naturally easier over time. And I've trusted essentially like as I keep training on different components, then I go to the tournament and then I'm like, oh, I actually recognized that I could do like this type of double squeeze on this hand, when before I might have either sat there forever and maybe got to it or just like not seen it at all.
So in your journey from, let's say junior intermediate player up to expert level, what have been the things that you have actively done? Everyone just says, oh, you play a lot, you play against and with the best players. But have you done anything like really systematic training in any way?
Yeah. So I think for me, it started more organically. And then like I really like to think about things in a structured and systematic way. So I've kind of developed more like systematic things over time, I think. So I think at first, like definitely agree with Live Bridge. I think a huge unlock for me was when I graduated from college. I moved to the Bay Area from the East Coast and actually started playing as much Live Bridge as possible. And this was fall of 2019. But I played in club games every week after work. I played every sectional every weekend that I could. But then once COVID hit, essentially did the same thing with online, played like every Reynolds, every Schaefer game that I could, and similar things. And I think that really helped. Like, this is, I would say, more intermediate to advanced players. And I think the other thing that I started doing more, I guess, like you could say that's systematic. Like, look at the calendar of every single bridge tournament you can play and like make yourself figure out how to play them all, find partners and teammates, which I think is a huge barrier for people, and just like go and play. Even if your favorite partner isn't available, like just, yeah, having that more experience is huge. And then I think in terms of actually like training more, probably very organically, the first thing I started doing more with people was like just reviewing every single hand I played. So like go back, look at every single hand and like think of yourself, like, was I sure about this action? Did I think that was right? Or like, was I considering another action? So that's, I think, also a systematic way to do it. And then I would say the third one of actually like thinking about like a self-diagnostic of all the different components of your bridge game, and then going through and pinpointing which areas should I actually work on. We did it like a junior women's intensive program. So we split our self-diagnostic into like 4 sections: individual card play, partnership bidding, group training, and then stamina training. I think that one is one I'm really like passionate about promoting because I think people don't talk about it enough. But I think the Live Bridge really helps with the stamina training of just like, can I play like multiple days and not get tired? People are definitely get tired. And then also like having mental strength during the game of like not being tilted. I think that's a huge aspect of the game that really impacts a lot of people, especially in high stress and tournament environments. So I think like the stamina training is about thinking about like where you're at now and then trying to do things that help with that during the tournament itself. And also just like playing a lot of higher stress tournaments, I think can help with that. Like put yourself in like I don't know, like locally, like maybe like the GNTs or like a regional knockout, something that's where you're going to play against kind of better players. And then going to, I think like the European transnationals was a huge one for me, where it's more serious. Like they have screens and everything. So I think that intensity can really help with that. And that to me, that echoed kind of what Zia was saying with playing money bridge in your post, like increasing
Mhm.
the stakes.
Yeah.
And that's going to help you a lot.
Let me just ask you one thing about the stamina. Do you do things outside of bridge to train for that?
I think when it comes to a tournament, like my main focus is like sleep and then water. I'd say those are the most important ones physically. We did like a whole tournament prep training in Atlanta for the juniors where we did physical, mental, and team preparation. So more like team spirit preparation. So on the physical side, I think a big one is just like never getting headaches or migraines. It used to happen to me a lot more. And then I've like prioritize getting like 8, 9 hours per night at a tournament, always having enough water around, eating healthy between sets. So, and then I think that's really helped me like eliminate it. And then I always have a painkiller on hand just in case. I agree with the exercise one. I'm really bad at that one. So that's one I'm trying to improve at too. But I fully believe that, like, yeah, getting into better physical health can help with your stamina at the tournaments.
You go to a sectional, let's say, and you play in a pair game on Saturday and a team game on Sunday. What sort of post-mortem work are you doing to analyze your play afterwards?
Yeah, so if it's like a sectional, usually like a lower stakes tournament, I'll be more focused on just like both like the social aspect and then, but also learning from all my mistakes there and just not even mistakes, but just learning in general. So I think like basically our routine is we go to lunch and we'll take hand records, go through as many as we can get through during lunch, then go to dinner together, take the hand records and literally just start from board one. I like going in order. Go from board one. Everybody says like what happened at their table. If something interesting happened, they'll share a story or it might turn into a problem or like we'll notice something in the double dummy sheet and then just do it as a double dummy problem. So I'll do that more at like a less serious tournament. And then I think at a real serious tournament, I'm like very focused on conserving mental energy. So for example, at lunch, I like will refuse to listen to anyone else's hands. I will only talk about my own hands. So hopefully people don't get too offended by that, but I have to explain that a lot. And then I won't start analyzing things. I'll basically just try to do my basic questions, like get those out of the way. I feel like I need to do like a bridge confessional essentially after each session where I'm like, okay, these were like the couple bad things that happened. Maybe these are a couple good things that happened. I'm not going to go into details and everything else to conserve my mental energy for that day.
Do you keep any records to track that sort of thing over time?
Honestly, no. I do keep a scorecard, but that's mainly because I like not having a million sheets of paper, but having a notebook. I usually do like one notebook a year that has all my scores, but I don't like actually go back.
I'm trying to think about that this year and like be systematic about it. I'm not sure what good it's going to do me, but I figure the data can't hurt. Yeah, yeah. And seeing patterns over time, like, oh, the thing I'm doing the most is I'm over preempting or, whatever. Not me. I would never. So, what do you do to prepare for a big tournament?
I think maybe we can split this up also into card play and bidding. I feel like the bidding for me, again, like that's not my focus. I think I just kind of do the standard things of like get together with your partner, schedule your practice sessions, like align on your system notes early. I really like having a clean set of system notes. Doesn't have to be like definitely not too long or exhaustive, but like I like having maybe like a 20-page version And then I'll turn that into like a 1-page cheat sheet of the things that I'm like less familiar with before the actual tournament. And then for card play, I would say like I don't think about that in terms of preparing for a specific tournament, but just like generally thinking about how I can get better at card play and like focusing on specific areas. Then designing the women's U26 women's training program, I think helped me be a lot more systematic with it. I actually went through essentially a bunch of different online resources of here's like all the categories of declare play, mainly declare play. And then we also did a lighter touch version of defense, but like here's all the categories and topics. And then think about organizing them into different lessons and themes. And then for myself, that helped me realize like as I was writing each of these lessons for the juniors, like this one I'm so comfortable with. This one I'm not comfortable with. And so I need to like spend some more time on that. So like tangibly like doing this lesson series, I was like, okay, eliminations and end plays, that was super comfortable for me. But then, for example, like squeezes, especially like double squeezes, I was so uncomfortable with. And then I spent like a week like categorizing all the different types. So like positional, non-positional, simultaneous, non-simultaneous, studying a bunch of different hands and like trying to construct some practice problems and then being able to do the pattern recognition when I'm like going through different concepts. I like to do everything like very structured, like literally writing out like this is a positional simultaneous. And we kind of made up all these names ourselves too, comparing that with like the Clyde Love book on squeezes, seeing how he categorized things. Like that kind of exercise to me helped me so much. And I think it's very different for different types of thinkers.
If you just like want to drill and practice, what does that look like?
I think for me, it's more like the everyday, making sure that I try to find some time to think about bridge every day in some way. So that could be like, usually it's playing an 8-board BBO challenge with Kevin. And then I think another thing that's just to keep your brain like fresh. I really like doing like random problems. And again, I'm very lucky to have Kevin who's like likes reading bridge winners and like finds the good problems and will send them to me. And then I might spend some time like on my commute thinking like using that as my bridge time, practicing my visualization with that.
So is Kevin your main mentor, would you say?
Yeah, I would say like definitely my absolute like most main mentor. I think I have been pretty lucky again through the junior program and also as I started playing a bit more professionally to have like had exposure and like learning from other people as well. So I mean definitely the Rosenbergs have taught me so much. And then also like, for example, sometimes like Kevin and I can definitely disagree about things. And then we're like, okay, I need to bring it to Debbie and Michael and see their opinions here.
They side with you sometimes over their son?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, it's less about siding. There's no sides. It's just like right or wrong, you know? It's not actually right or wrong, but just like this is actually what's expert standard or like Michael's opinion of like what's right or wrong. And I think I've been lucky to be able to get some other flavors and philosophies about bridge. So people have been influential. Like Roger was a partnership coach
Roger
on
Lee.
the junior teams. Yeah. And he like I think has really cool ideas about bidding that he shared with us. Like, for example, he would have us like bid hands one way and then be like, okay, now let's like redo it and see what happens if you like made your other bid and then go through the exact same hand and bidding process again. So that was very helpful. And then I played with Chris Willinkin for a while, and he has a lot of very specific bidding theories and like gadgets that he really believes in. I played with Palma for like 2 days in a mixed event, very random and last minute. I learned that ace jack 10s are super undervalued. So I always think about that now in king 10-9 holdings. So yeah, I think that's been really helpful, specifically how playing it with and against top players can influence you.
What are the dynamics like of having a mentor who's also your romantic partner?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of bridge partners who are also romantic partners, I think, in the bridge world, and everyone has their own way that they incorporate bridge into their lives. I think for me and Kevin, like talking about bridge was really the foundation of our relationship and where we like connected the most. And I think since we both really like doing that a lot, it's worked pretty well. Like we're never like, I mean, yeah, I think pretty much never we're like, okay, let's not talk about bridge anymore. I think, yeah, that's also a lot of his relationship with his parents too. Like they also all enjoy talking about bridge a lot. We actually like don't really play bridge together, like with his parents, but we instead just like talk about it a lot, like talk about random hands that came up. So I think, yeah, for us, that's just like really bonded us. And then I think we started playing together more like later, more recently. And I think that's been a different, like slightly different side to our relationship. But generally, like I think, I don't know, it's been pretty smooth. There's only been like a couple times where things got more stressful and we had to be like, okay, we need to calm down about this, just like in a couple really higher stakes events. But yeah, I think generally we have a very good bridge playing relationship. And I believe in that for like all partnerships, actually, like some of those ground rules.
You're working with juniors, and you said the big stepping stone is visualizing and counting out the hand. So, are there exercises that you've developed or that you give the kids to help with that?
I think a couple which have worked to varying degrees of success. I think one of the first ones we like to do that we tried out a bit is like we play a hand and then we just pause it in the middle and we're like, okay, everybody write down what you think all the shapes are at this point in the hand. And then a couple tricks later, we'll pause again and be like, write it down again. Is this different? And I think the first time we did this, like people were just putting in 12 card, 14 card hands in their responses. So I think, yeah, I think that's a good exercise. I think writing stuff down really helped me for sure. Like even if you're doing like a single or double dummy problem, like write it down on paper or whiteboard, like cross stuff out. I really liked giving them worksheets. And I know some people were like, okay, this feels like school, but like we're trying to learn here, so maybe it should feel like school. And I think a lot of the kids have, especially the younger ones, have done well with worksheets. So you give them the hand and then they can like cross it out, erase things, like like circle things, write arrows around. So I think building that foundation in an easier way, I think is helpful. And then eventually we'll try to get it to like force you to do it without writing anything down. That was definitely something I think Kevin helped out with me in the beginning. He would like give me a problem and I would be like, okay, like at first I was writing things down. He was like, no, you're not allowed to do that anymore. And sometimes it would take me like twice as long to just like sit there and stare at the wall and be like, okay, I can keep it in my head.
Start maybe with a scratch pad next to the computer playing online and just stop yourself and write things down. That's interesting. Yeah, I like that. Is there advice that you give the juniors before a big tournament?
I think our big ones, maybe going back to that framework of like tournament preparation, mental, physical, mental, and like team. I think, I mean, this is probably true for all of them, but like team, we really wanted to try to emphasize it, even though it's really hard, is just like, I think being a supportive partner and teammate can go so far. Of like, if people are feeling good about themselves and confident in their play, they will play better. And it like, especially bridge, it's so easy to like missort your hand or like miscount your, like do something really basic because you're like too emotional for some reason. Either like your partner said something mean to you, or you just like are getting really down on yourself about like a bad play you made. I think being a supportive partner and teammate is huge. And definitely something that we need to, I think, not just like it comes out a lot in juniors for sure, but probably in all stages.
Are there common mistakes that you see at different levels?
Yeah, I think, okay, honestly, the first one that comes to mind is I think for a lot of like the more advanced, like U26 juniors, I see a lot of like high risk plays being made because they want to make the big play. And I mean, I think there's some benefit to that. Like they'll like, toss a high card as like a false card, even though it just actually was totally wrong in this situation. And I think I think doing that honestly is probably really good for learning because then you actually learn faster about when this stuff is right and when it's wrong, but probably not the highest return during a tournament. So like during the tournament, we're like, okay, we have to just like focus on getting the basics right. And in the junior environment, it's going to take you very far.
Swinging for the fences instead of going for a single?
Yeah, exactly. My philosophy for like doing well in a single tournament is to not not swing, especially when you're like not the clearly weaker team or pair. And yeah, so I think some people get kind of like addicted to like making a really like fancy play or something like that, because sometimes when they do it and it's right, it's like, wow, like everyone compliments them and praises them for that and like writes it up on bridge winners. But is it worth doing it like 10 times when it's wrong to get that one time when it's right?
The incentive structure sometimes is wrong there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like we're not praising players who are just like consistent. It's like that one big play kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, get your name in the newspaper.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
common phrase that I heard. Like, don't try to get your name written up.
yeah. What
Yeah.
about non-juniors, like at the expert level? Are there, like a type of or category of mistake that you see more often from the expert level players than the world class ones?
Like, honestly, what comes to mind is like being like just very like yeah, it all comes back to consistency. Like I feel like I'm going to see even like very experienced expert players like make a silly mistake, like miscount something or like give the wrong signal because they played a little bit too fast on a certain hand. Like just not like extreme consistency and like sometimes getting a little bit lazy. Sometimes like over trusting a partner's signal versus bridge logic, because oftentimes like maybe your partner didn't have the right spot to give that signal and you didn't think of that part, or like maybe people were not on the same page, or your partner just like was a little not careful and gave slightly the wrong signal. So I think big like use bridge logic over like exactly what you saw your partner play, or exactly even like how declare played. Sometimes like my personal I think theme that I'm trying to work on is that sometimes declare plays in a certain way and I'm just like, oh, they must have this holding because they played it this way, and they don't. Like even against a good player, it might have just been a reason that I couldn't think of. So that's like I think one thing too, like getting stuck in this picture of the hand and not being flexible enough to change it.
Yeah, I feel like that consistency and concentration is huge. And one of the questions I'm trying to solve this year is how to develop that, how to get better at that. Why is Rodwell so much better at that than I am? And is that innate? Is that something that can be systematically worked on? Do you have any thoughts or opinions on that?
I just feel like the world class players, like they just will instantly absorb every spot and like don't need to think back like, oh wait, was that 8 or 7 or was picked up? Like they just like absorb it and then like the shape changes based on a different play. Like a lot of the basics, it's just like instant, and then they can actually think about the more difficult things. And I think that like one small example is like I changed the way I counted high card points. I think early COVID, and I started like grouping things together more. Like the ace king queen jack is a 10, or ace queen is a 10, and then that just like made my high card point counting so much faster. And I was like, wow, I can just save time on that and then use my energy for other stuff. Like that's a small example.
I 100% agree with you that the more stuff that can be automated, the more brain space you have for the next level. Right? I mean, I think that's what differentiates every level. When you start, counting to 13 in the trump suit is like monumental effort.
Yeah,
And then that becomes second nature, and you can do the next thing. And then
exactly.
you can do the next thing and the next thing. And I'm not entirely sure how that process happens other than just experience and boards played. But I feel like the more engaged you are with it, the more you're getting out of those boards played. What I very much want is noticing the spots and counting out all the hands and stuff to be more automatic than it already is. Some hands, you get the shape at trick one and you feel like I got this game, right? And sometimes you're just very wrong or you're lazy. So what do you think, right? If a junior comes to you and says, this is what I really want to work on, Amber. I know this is what's holding me back. What should I do?
You've talked about this in your bridge winners post too about like removing mindless bridge. I think because of online bridge, like I'll see juniors just like playing like 100 hands in an hour or something. Like And it's probably not like, I think that it's not actually helping them. Maybe if they're like very new, it's helping them, but it's not giving them the time to think. So I think like that would be my first advice. Like if you're going to play robot games, like force yourself to like write out the shapes. Like that's the one. Write out the shapes while you do it and like actually like make different plans and think about different shapes and don't just like click cards. I think that's a big one that takes discipline. And then I think like do that a lot and then it'll translate into your actual game. Some other examples are just like actually sitting down like on the bidding side of things. I think for me a huge unlock was like when I went from like very basic system notes to like actually doing the exercise of writing down like not to actually use this with your partner, but like an exercise, writing down every single auction type and seeing if I knew what it meant. And a lot of times it would be like, well, like I know what the first two levels of this auction mean, but then once it gets here, I'm like, I don't know what that means anymore. And then I was able to pinpoint all these auctions that I had no idea what they meant, and then ask my mentors what they meant after that.
So what do your notes look like? You said you'd like to keep them short?
Yeah, I mean, depends on the partnership. I think that I had like kind of my standard set of notes that I developed with Emma. That was really the first time I did a serious undertaking of system, and we were playing transfers over a club, so there was a little bit more nuance there. And I think that like my first version of those notes was very detailed because it was actually just me learning standard bridge bidding. It was not like for the purpose of, yeah, quickly agreeing on good fast review. But then I worked on making like a clean version of those notes, which like kind of took out what most people would consider like standard bidding. That would be like, here's the concise, yeah, here's a way that you could actually skim this and like know what we play in like 30 minutes or something.
Do you read bridge books? Are there any that have been particularly foundational for you?
I definitely don't read very much. So I think like reading bridge books can be so helpful for different types of people. Like, for example, there's this, I think he's 10 years old, named Alex, who basically learned bridge himself through bridge books and also through taking lessons through Bridge Whiz, which are like once a week online classes. So they're great, but they're not going to be enough to like get you to like really learn bridge quickly. And like this kid just like loves reading, will just like absorb books instantly and can like remember like everything he's read. It's pretty incredible.
Has he read my book?
I don't know, but
Well, he should. He
I'll
definitely.
recommend them if not. But yeah, like for example, the first book I gave him when I first met him in November or December was How to Read Your Opponent's Cards.
Classic.
Classic. I really like that one. Like there's a couple that people have recommended that I felt like I really resonated with. Mostly about card play. I really have not read many books on bidding, but I think Rodwell Files is definitely the most influential one on me. I think I've read it like 3 times now, like after a couple years each time. And like every time I feel like I can get something different out of it. But it was really like the first time I feel like I was exposed to higher level bridge thinking. I think I first read it as like a junior and I was like, wow, people can actually like do all of these things with bridge that I'd never thought of before. Any books that are like very much like categorizing how to do card play in different ways, those I really like reading. So I actually liked reading like Clyde Love's just dictionary of squeezes, and like how he categorized things versus how I've learned them from other people. I liked Mike Lawrence's False Cards. And like the reason I even read those 2 books were in putting together junior training materials as like my incentive there. So that's kind of what I would actually like to go and read. Like Kevin, he really likes just like fun problem books. So yeah, like I think when he was a kid, he really liked Bridge in the Menagerie and like Bridge Adventures of Androcles McVick is one of his favorites, just like ridiculous like problems in it.
So if I paid you to study bridge, I said, you don't need a job. Well, you're not going to train the juniors. I want you 60 hours a week to become a better bridge player. What do you think your days would look like? What do you think you would do?
I mean, yeah, that would be, I
The
mean, okay, I
dream,
was gonna say
right?
a dream, but like also I kind of did do that actually in so in 2023 from like May to December, I did an internship with the ACBL Educational Foundation. So I did spend like a decent number of hours a week helping develop some of their different programs, but I had a lot more free time than before to think about bridge and train it. I'd say at that stage, I was probably, yeah, definitely a much weaker player back then. But I think back then, again, even more live bridge, like I would schedule at least like a couple regular, maybe every day club games just to have that live bridge focus, especially if it's like a decently strong game. And then all the sectionals, all the regionals, and like travel. Oh yeah, definitely travel. I would just go to like whatever regional there was like every other week maybe. At that time, I re-went through every single bridge master, starting with level 1 and making sure that I could like fully explain every one of them. It wasn't just like, okay, I feel like that's the right answer. Like, great. I would be very strict to myself about like being able to explain it very properly, each one. And not the level 5s. I went to level 4, and level 5s are like, to me, in the category of more like the fun problem hands that you'll more about like your creative thinking and like back visualization in bridge versus trying to like train your like more common types of hands. And then, yeah, very regular partnership practice, bidding practice. So that time I was playing with Chris. So we had weekly sessions. And then I also went through all the notes and like remade the system notes into like a clean way, which also helped me learn them very well. One thing that I think Rogers always suggested to his students essentially is like go through like the records of the top players playing, like bid all these hands yourself, and then see how all the top players bid it. And now you have perfect records of that too. And then I think for me personally, I would like, as I go through all of that, I would want to categorize everything. So I'd want to make like my own dictionary of like bidding and card play essentially, of like patterns. Like I would notice myself about top players doing this thing frequently or this thing.
What do you think we can do to get more young people playing and make the game more appealing to a younger crowd?
I think my biggest thing is making it fun, like making the environment fun. And I think a lot of people will be attracted to the game itself, but it'll be much easier to spend more time on bridge if it also gives you like the social experience with it, just because it is such a time consuming hobby. I think traveling to tournaments, even like our local tournaments, they pretty much require a full day off. And that's why a lot of, I think, our college players don't play that much in person bridge. Like at least online, they can like section off 2 or 3 hours, morning, afternoon, evening, and just do it then and have their other activities. But to actually go in person, they have to like figure out transportation, spend a whole day there, like take off from their other activities, which I think is really hard to do in college. But I think making it a more social experience then, and you can get everything you want out of going to a tournament, is like probably a really big way to get more people. I think we've actually been able to do that pretty well in the Bay Area because there's like a decent number of like 20, 30 somethings who go to a lot of these tournaments, and we're like, oh, let's go get lunch, let's go get dinner afterwards and talk about the hands. So you can kind of get everything together bundled.
What role do you think technology can and should play in introducing people to the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been so helpful for a lot of people in both introducing and getting better. Like, I think like the social tournament experience is how you hook people essentially because they want to go to these tournaments and it's a lot of fun and rewarding to see themselves get better too in the early stages. But technology is the easiest way you can actually like practice yourself is like go on BBO or whatever platform and play lots of hands. That's so much more efficient than like needing to find 4 people and do a game.
Anything else that you would like to say or recommend to me, to our audience, as we try to spend this year figuring out how to get better at bridge?
My first thought that comes to mind when you ask that is just like think about ways you can make it fun for yourself. I really empathize a lot with like the juniors for this summer. We've tried to push like a much more higher hour requirement of training program to them. And I know it's going to be really hard for most of them to actually do it. But I think that players who actually do it the most are the ones who are friends with their teammates and partners and like see it as a way to hang out. So very similar to what I was just saying before, but even for the serious training aspect, like, yeah, I see the teams who are all friends with each other, they're playing a lot more because they just have fun doing it together versus the teams who like don't know each other yet. And I think like if you're trying to just do it yourself, like I think getting a friend or a romantic partner or family member involved and doing it together makes it so much more fun. Like I really doubt, I think that I would have had as much motivation to like get so much better if I hadn't like made such good friends with Emma and the Kolesniks and like the Bay Area people and Kevin. So I think that's really what drove me and motivated me, and not just like pure like self interest in getting better, which is great if that can motivate you. But like I think it's rare. It's a lot harder.
Amber, thank you so much. Thank you for all you're doing with the USBF juniors, especially. And this was really informative, helpful, thought provoking. So thanks a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, great talking to you. And yeah, I look forward to hearing the other interviews when they come out and reading more about your journey.
Thank you.